How you guys doing? Doing all right? We're gonna have a little bit of fun today. I'm gonna use my friend here. Make sure it's working. We good? We got it? Yeah? Hey. Ooh. Okay. Welcome to Shepherd Youth. My name is Jeff. I'm gonna preach. Hey. Hey. All right, that's enough. Stop. That went a lot better yesterday. I missed triggers today. How you guys doing? Doing all right? Hopefully you're awake now. We are continuing our series this weekend, which is called Stressed Out. And last week, my friend Adri gave us a great message in Genesis chapter 12. She called that, you guys remember what she called it? She called it the origin story for Abraham. She said it was the "you're a wizard, Harry" moment for Abraham. But Abraham's call was greater than that of a young wizard, but to be the father of a great nation. And so, Adri asked you guys to do two things. What did she say Abraham did in Genesis 12? God talked to Abraham. He said two things. To what? Leave. And then the second thing, to what? Go. You guys are listening very well. I'm going to tell her. And then she asked you guys to consider what God is asking you to leave. And then before you left last week, she said, consider your go. And so I pray that you guys have been considering what your go is and what it looks like in your life as a middle school and high school student. And so today we continue in this series. I have the awesome privilege of taking us through Genesis chapter 14. And I'm so glad because it involves a great war story. Technically, this is the first war in the Bible. The first one that we'll read about in the Bible. How many of you guys, like me, anybody in the room that love like movies that have a war or like a battle or like a big fight scene, right? Love that. Me too. Yesterday there was like a lot of people like, nah, I don't like violence. I was like, all right, whatever. So before we start, we're gonna play a game. Listen up. My man's in the front. I'm gonna cue up a sound of a famous quote or a famous something from a war movie or a war type movie. And so find someone next to you and maybe play this game and see if you can figure out which movie it is. You guys ready? All right, here's the first one. Listen up.
Madness. This is Sparta!
Yeah. Yeah. What movie is that from? 300. Very good, very good. Next one, here it is.
Oh, my Lord, 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 Lord.
This one's difficult. This one's old. It's a throwback.
Oh, my Lord, Lord, Lord.
Anybody know that one? No, they say Wakanda. No. It is Black History Month, but that is from a movie from like the very, very early 90s called Glory. I love that movie. It has Denzel Washington and Morgan Freeman. And that movie is about the first African-American Civil War unit. I love that movie. Here it is, number 3.
For Frodo.
That's it.
For Frodo.
Sorry, this one's harder to hear apparently. This one says, for Frodo.
For Frodo.
What is it? Which one? Not Fellowship. Return of the King. Who says that line? Aragorn. Thanks, Brienne, who fell asleep during the movie. Here's number 4. Listen up.
Are you not entertained? Are you not entertained?
What is it? Gladiator. Like Caleb sat over here yesterday and he was like, Gladiator, and he's like, Gladiator. I'm like, yeah. All right. Number 5, probably one of my favorites of all time. Here it is. Ready?
You shall not pass!
That's right. Gandalf. Gandalf the what? The Gray. Very good. All right, these last 4, because the ones that we just did might be a little bit more old. So these ones are all Marvel. Ready? Here it is. Number 6. What movie is that from? Homegirl in the back was like, I got this one. I got this one. I got you. All right, here it is. Number 7.
Wakanda forever!
That's right. I told you it's Black History Month. All right, two more. Number 8.
Stay down. Final warning. I could do this all day.
I got a lot of answers here. I got Avengers, I got Iron Man, I got Civil War. What is it? Captain America Civil War, probably my favorite scene when he fights Iron Man. All right, last one. And this is because it's the end of the game, so.
You should have gone for the head.
Snap! And then like half the room gone. And so for the rest of the day, I'm just gonna preach to one side. Is that cool? Because you guys are all kidding. All right, listen up. Hey, let's focus back in. So last week, Adrian took us through Genesis chapter 12. Listen up. God calls Abraham. He'll be the father of a great nation. He leaves everything behind and he goes heading towards Negev. Today, we'll be in chapter 14. But first, let's talk about what happens in 13. I don't want to talk about 14 if you don't know what happens in 13, right? So a little bit of a review, right? Genesis chapter 13 is what I would call the first account in the trilogy, again, movie themes, the trilogy of the Abraham and Lot stories, right? And in chapter 13, if you read it, when I read it, basically Abraham and his nephew Lot, everywhere they go, they come through dripping. Everywhere. Like they got cattle, like dripping in cattle, like donkeys and cows and stuff. Maybe not as flashy as, Bruno Mars and everybody else, but in Genesis chapter 13, it says that Lot and Abraham had so much stuff. It says that the very land that they were on could not contain all that they had. And so in Genesis chapter 13, I call this episode in the trilogy, the Great Separation, because what happens is they see that the land can't hold them, and Abraham, in his kindness, says, hey, nephew, because Lot says, nephew, you choose. You go left and I'll go right, but if you go right, then I'll go left. So that's what happens. He gives him the choice, and Lot chooses his land, and that is the first episode of the trilogy called The Great Separation. So today, Genesis chapter 14, we know it's an epic war. We just talked about it. We played a game, right? But it's centered around our main character from last week, Abraham. This war is called the War of Kings in chapter 14. It's epic, but it's all really about Abraham, and it sets the scene for this second account in the trilogy of Abraham and Lot stories, right? So I call this one, chapter 14, the Great Rescue, right? And so we're gonna read together. Disclaimer, the king's names in this chapter are super difficult. And so I'm going to mess up some of these names, and that's okay. But before I mess them up, I'm gonna use my friend once more, and I called my homegirl. She's like super smart. I can literally ask her any question, and she will give me every answer. Her name is Google Translate. It's my girl. All right, so we're gonna read chapter 14, so if you have it, if not, it's on the screen here. We're gonna read Genesis chapter 14, verse 1 says, in the days of
Amraphel, king of Shinar. Arioch, king of Elazar.
Yep, this one's crazy.
Kedorlaomer, king of Elam.
And
Tidal, king of Goyim.
verse 2, these kings made war with,
Bera, king of Sodom.
and,
Birsha, king of Gomorrah.
and,
Shinab, king of Admah.
also,
Shemeber, king of Zeboim.
and the,
King of Bela. That is Zor.
that is Zor. All right, those are the kings. It's not Siri, it's Google Translate, man, come on. Right, it says, verse 3, and all these joined forces in the valley of Siddim, that is the Salt Sea, also known as the Dead Sea today. And 12 years they had served Kedorlaomer, but in the 13th year they rebelled. Verse 5, in the 14th year, Kedorlaomer and the kings who were with him came and defeated the Rephaim and Asheroth Karnaim, the Zuzim and Ham, the Emim and Sheva Kirithaim. and the Horites in their hill country of Seir, as far as El Paran, on the border of the wilderness. Verse 7, then they turned back and came to En-Mishpat, that is Kadesh, and defeated all the country of the Amalekites and also the Amorites who were dwelling in Hazazon Tamar. Verse 8, then the king of Sodom, the king of Gomorrah, the king of Admah, the king of Zeboim, the king of Bela, that is Zor, went out and joined battle in the valley of Siddim with Kedorlaomer, king of Elam, Tidal king of Goim, Amraphel king of Shinar, Arioch the king of Elasar. And in verse 9 it says 4 kings verses 5. Why can't you just start there? Like whoever wrote this, like, hey bro, just say like, hey man, there's a story about 4 kings verses 5. Good. Probably should have sounded like this.
Genesis 14. In the days of a whole lot of kings, well, 9 to be exact, 5 kings decide, I've had it. Stop taking our money, dog. Eventually, it was time to throw some hands. So, it was 4 verses 5 down by the Dead Sea.
Simple, right? Oh wait, we're doing movie stuff, right? So here we go.
Spoiler alert, this is going down by the Dead Sea. Somebody about to die today.
That's where we're headed. That would have been a lot easier for me if I read it that way. That's actually a recording of my uncle, Jerome. Kidding, that's me. All right, verse 10, let's keep reading. Now the valley of Siddim was full of bitumen pits, which is tar pits. And as the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah fled, some fell into them, and the rest fled into hill country. Verse 11, so the enemy took all the possessions of Sodom and Gomorrah and all their provisions and went their way. Verse 12, this one's important, listen up. They also took Lot, the son of Abraham's brother, his nephew, who was dwelling in Sodom, and his possessions, and went their way. Then one who had escaped came and told Abraham, the Hebrew, who was living by the oaks of Mamre, the Amorite, brother of Eshcol and of Aner. These were allies of Abraham. Verse 14, when Abraham heard that his kinsmen had been taken captive, he led forth his trained men, born in his house, 318 of them, and went in pursuit as far as Dan. Verse 15, and he divided his forces against them by night, he and his servants, and they defeated them and pursued them to Hobah, north of Damascus. And then verse 16, then he brought back all the possessions, and also brought back his kinsman, Lot, with his possessions, and the women and the people. The Great Rescue is the title of this area of the trilogy, right? Because Abraham rescues who? Lot, his nephew. How does he do it? How many soldiers did he take? 318 dudes. Like, if I was one of those guys, and he was like, all right, guys, listen up, we're gonna go in, we're gonna go to battle. 318 of us, we're gonna fight 4 kings and all their armies. Hey, Abraham, we got other people coming with us? Nah, just 318. That's all I needed. It's crazy, right? No big deal. He did it. All right, again, we're in this series called Stressed Out, and today we're talking about the issue of being stressed out by situations that are beyond our control. So there are 3 things I want to accomplish with you in these next few minutes. 3 things in your notes, if you can write this down quickly. The first thing is think. I want you to think. I want you to consider Abraham. Understand how a person of faith dealt with his stressful situation. Consider Abraham. Understand how a person of faith dealt with his stressful situation. The second thing we're going to do is consider the now, as in identify situations in your life that are beyond our control that can be stressful. Identify situations beyond our control that can be stressful. And the last thing in your notes, if you can write it down fast, is I want you to apply. And the goal there is that you and I, that we would take steps to deal with stressful situations. Guys, in our lives, when things happen outside of our control, we feel like we're facing a battle. Maybe it's not a physical battle, maybe you're not actually physically fighting, but it can be a battle for control, an emotional battle, a relational battle, or a spiritual battle in our lives. I read this earlier this week about stress. It says stress is the mental, emotional, or physical strain caused by anxiety that is caused by an external situation. Right? So basically, an external situation, something happens, and it causes us to have anxiety. And that anxiety causes us to have strain and stress on our mind and our emotions. Today, my goal is that we would learn together what it looks like to rely on God in situations beyond our control. So let me ask you guys a couple questions. Any of you guys this week, just this week, has anything stressed you out? Say, girl, I got both hands. Right? It's this question. How many of those situations were beyond your control? Meaning that it wasn't really your fault, but something happened that didn't involve you, but it stressed you out. Somehow it involved you, right? Both hands, my man, okay. Right? And lastly, how many of you guys, just be honest, you don't have to raise your hand on this one. If you want to, that's fine too. But how many of you guys in those moments when you are stressed out, how many of you feel like you're the only one that's being stressed out, that's in that moment, right? Me too. I'm here to tell you today that you're not the only person that deals with that stress. I deal with it too. I'm not up here because I'm the most perfect, never stressed out person. That's not why I'm up here. And then for me, guys, in these moments when I do feel stressed out in my life, whatever that thing is that's causing me stress, it's almost as if that stress begins to wrap its arms around me, or like a python wrapping itself around me. And I feel like that stress at times will take me away, throw me into a dark room, close the door, lock the door, take the key, throw away the key, and leaves me by myself. That's sometimes how I feel if I'm not careful. And the truth is, middle school student, high school student, young adult, everybody in the room, the truth is that you are not alone. Everyone deals with stress. You're not cursed. Nothing is wrong with you. Everyone deals with stress. The fact is, uncontrollable situations are a part of life, guys. Things happen that we have no control over, and they happen to us all. It's a part of life. And you have options to help you deal with that stress. But don't be confused. Don't get it twisted. Don't be misinformed, as Paul would say. This doesn't mean that situations you're dealing with now or in life will be easy to work through by any means. It doesn't mean they'll be easy. Battles are hard, right? But I believe it's possible to deal with situations beyond our control in a healthy way, rather than letting our stressful situations consume us and tear us apart. So again, in Genesis chapter 14, just to review, we have 9 kings, 4 kings versus 5, the Dead Sea kings, right? The 5 kings are fed up with serving the 4. They wage war. The 4 kings win. They seize all the goods and all the food from Sodom and Gomorrah. And verse 16 tells us that the kings also carried off Abraham's nephew Lot, along with Lot's possessions, since he was living in Sodom. Something just to understand, if you read and you actually dive into some of this, it would tell you that in this time, being captured in war was not a pleasant situation for anyone. It don't matter what kind of money you got, who you know, how famous you are, it didn't matter. If you got caught up in war and you were a captive, it was a bad situation, a stressful situation, right? And Lot is a captivity of war in this chapter. It says that it's very likely that Lot would have faced torture, slavery, and even death. Very likely. So, in that moment, you would get the sense that this 4-king army is powerful, but also this situation would stress out Lot and stress out Abraham, his uncle. And so when Abraham found this out about his nephew being kidnapped and taken away, I'm sure he had some thoughts about the situation. The Bible doesn't say that Abraham was stressed out, but aren't they family, right? Lot and Abraham are family. How many of you guys feel like you endure the most amount of stress because of family? Yeah, some of y'all are lying. Probably because you sit next to your brother or sister, you're like, listen, I grew up with 2 sisters, my auntie, my grandmother, my mom, a female cousin, 6 women in one house. I went through all kinds of stress growing up. So, you might imagine that this situation would have burdened Abraham, even though he wasn't even there. Like his nephew, man, my nephew got kidnapped, he might die. So 2 things that would come to my mind that I think Abraham might have thought about, 2 things that he would have thought about, right, is the power of this 4-king army. They seemed unstoppable, I'm sure, and out of Abraham's control. He had 318 guys, like it's out of his control, right? Maybe for a moment, Abraham, he wondered and considered if he actually went into this war, or went into this battle, maybe his friends, his family members, who would die? Maybe he, bless you, maybe he asked himself, how can we stand up to an army of 4 kings knowing that they literally just wiped out everything that got in their way on their way to Sodom? The second thing I would have thought about is this image of battle. Like Abraham is leading his people, and the image of battle for him, he's not a fighter. He's not known as some war hero at this point in his story. And so you can imagine the stress that he would have felt and thought about taking his people into war like this. Guys, battling is stressful. The battle is stressful. It's taxing emotionally, physically, mentally. Battles are hard to control because you don't know what your enemy can do. You don't really know what they can do. And so when this happens, your senses, everything is all on edge. You're on edge. Like you're literally like, you take one more L and you're gonna go full tilt. Any gamers in the room know what that's like? Yeah. And so in your notes, I have a question there. It says, how did Abraham deal with situations beyond his control? How did he deal with situations beyond his control? 3 things that Abraham did that you and I can do. And the proof is Abraham did it. So first one in your notes is Abraham had good perception. Abraham's courage came from his past encounters with God. And then under there I wrote, the power of looking back. And again, if you later on, next week, maybe this week, read chapter Genesis 18 and 19, that's the 3rd part of the trilogy. And that story, you'll be reminded really quickly when I say the power of looking back and what that can do. Trust me. This morning, we sang a song called Do It Again. Right? And if Abraham had a song to sing, this wasn't written then, but these words might have been sung then. What if Abraham said, God, your promise still stands. Great is your faithfulness. You've never failed me yet. Why would you do it now? How often, guys, do we go through experiences in life where we almost feel like God is punishing us, right? We feel like he is not on our side, like he doesn't care about our situation or our problems, or like the things that are happening to us are outside of God's control. We actually feel that way sometimes. I've been there. But we have to believe in a faith that even though it may not make sense at the time or in the process, that everything that happens is part of God's plan. Second thing in your notes is Abraham, he came back with a swift response. A swift response. Even though it was messy and a painful situation, Abraham responded immediately, right? This doesn't mean that Abraham was impulsive, right? Or he acted without considering the consequences of going into battle. I'm sure he did all those things. He didn't take his people and have such a healthy life situation in this moment because he was impulsive. Abraham had to choose between what he wanted to do and what he ought to do, which was to get up and follow God. And while everything wasn't fully laid out for Abraham, he had to trust enough to get up and walk in order to follow God, follow God's leading. I do think it's reasonable to think that Abraham knew that God would protect him and provide for him in this conflict with the kings. He had to have some type of idea, and you know why? Because last week we read why. In Genesis chapter 12, you read it last week, it says this, in his promise, he says, I will bless those who bless you, and him who dishonors you, I will curse. Basically, God is like, Abraham, go. All your friends, they're my friends. And if you got enemies and people don't like you and they curse you, that's my problem. I'm gonna take care of them. God is literally telling Abraham, I'm on your side. So when Abraham has 318 dudes and 4 armies in front of him, they took his family. They're cursing Abraham. Abraham's like, okay, we're good. And so in your notes, I wrote down numbers are irrelevant. Nope, there it is. Numbers are irrelevant when God is for us. Numbers are irrelevant when God is for us. And that point for there is the last one is Abraham, he depended on God. He depended on God. He was clearly outnumbered. We knew that. Numbers don't lie, right? Today, we also sang a song called Lion and the Lamb. And again, if there was a song that Abraham could sing in that moment, he would say, God, you're a lion, you're roaring with power, and you're fighting this battle. He's fighting our battles. God is fighting our battles for us. Abraham faced the stressful situation with full dependence on God. Otherwise, he would have lost without God. And if you are taking notes today, and if you're not, here's the one thing I want you to write down. If you've been ignoring me this whole time and you don't like me, that's cool. I love you anyway. But listen to me. This is what I need from you, okay? I need you to write this down. Write it on your phone. I don't care what you do. Write it down somewhere. Here's the last thing I want you to write down is we cannot get through stressful situations on our own. You play sports, right? Anybody play sports in the room, you know you cannot win a game by yourself. You can't. You cannot. I don't care who it is or how good they are. You need people with you. You cannot do it alone. We need to depend on God, believing in faith that He will get us through those experiences. Before I wrap up today, there's something that I think a lot of you need to hear in this room. This story, right, in Genesis chapter 14 has a lot to do about this battle between 4 kings versus 5 kings, but I want to remind you that this is a trilogy of this Abraham and Lot story as well. And it allows us to think about Abraham versus Lot. 4 kings versus 5 kings, but also Abraham versus Lot. And in Abraham versus Lot, when we think about it, it really is Abraham versus Lot. We can observe 2 lives. We can observe 2 perspectives. We can observe 2 directions when it comes to Abraham and Lot. Episode 1, right? The great separation. We said it earlier in Genesis chapter 13. This is what it says, right? Abraham settled in the land of Canaan, while Lot settled among the cities of the valley and moved his tent as far as Sodom. Now the men of Sodom were wicked, great sinners against the Lord. That's facts. And a lot of y'all say that, like, facts? Like, facts. That's a bad area. And that's where Lot chose to live. This message is titled, Stressed Out by Situations Beyond Our Control, right? However, Lot put himself into a situation that was in his control. He didn't have to move to Sodom. Lot made the choice to live in a land full of wickedness and sinners. And so some of you, I'm gonna call you out, and you're not gonna like me about this, but I'm being real. There's situations that stress you out in your life. Listen up. You may be stressed out about situations in your life, and you wanna blame the devil. The devil didn't make you do nothing. Some situations for you high schoolers and even some of you middle school people and some of you young adults in this room is you wanna say, man, the devil, man, he's been making me do, no. A lot of situations in your life, you've been like Lot, and you've chose to do that thing. And no doubt you're getting stressed out about it, but that's not out of your control. You've made that decision. And I don't know what that is for you. Like I said, whoever's in the room, whatever that is for you, maybe it's a relationship that you're in. Maybe it's what you look at or how you look at things. Maybe it's what you do when you hang out with friends on the weekend. Maybe it's as simple as how you treat mom and dad. The most stressful season of my life, guys, like the hardest, most difficult, stress-filled season of my life was when I was 16 years old. Growing up, my family, I had a bunch of family in my home, but there was a lot of fighting in my home. And at this time of my life was probably the hardest because my mom and dad fought so much. And at this one weekend on a Saturday, I said, I don't want to be here anymore. And so I left the house and I called my friend. I was like, hey, can I come stay at your house? Went to my friend's house. We had pizza. We hung out, laughed, stayed up late. Sunday morning, I come to church, small church in the valley. My sisters aren't in the sanctuary, but they're in the back small youth room, and somebody brings me back there. And then in that moment, I find out that Saturday night, things happened at my house that resulted in that morning, my dad was then in jail. My dad was in prison and my mom was in the hospital. And in that moment, I didn't say anything. I just fell. Like there was no one to catch me. I just fell to the floor and I just began to weep and cry. I don't remember how long I did, but I cried my eyes out. I felt such guilt because I left the house. And at 16, I was same height I am now, but like 100 pounds heavier at least. So in my mind, I could have stopped that from happening. And that stuff stressed me out more than I've ever been stressed in my life. And it was beyond my control because I wasn't even there. What could I have possibly done not being there? And so in that moment, in that season of my life, I had to depend on God and depend on others. At that season of my life, my number one battle was for me to help redeem the love between my mother and my father. And I did. Me and my sisters, we did. My parents are still together. They're still married, still good. But in that situation, I need you to remember that we cannot get through stressful situations on our own. Abraham knew that. He knew that God was on his side. But you know what else he had? If you read, later on, read Genesis chapter 14, verse 13, it says that Abraham had allies. He had friends, people. He probably had older friends that were like wise and taught him things, younger people for him to pour into, to learn from. He had people in his life. And so in my situation as a 16-year-old young man in high school, I remember my face in my palms for who knows how long, and then once my eyes dried and I looked up, the only thing I saw, obviously my sisters were there, but I saw David Peacock, my youth leader, Daryl Johnson, my youth leader, Darren Green, my youth pastor, Randy Catabona, and his wife, Tanya Catabona. They were all my youth leaders that I knew, that I met the very first time I walked into the church. And those 5 adults with a lot of others, but those ones in particular were the ones that I knew for a fact that in my stress, I could not get through that situation on my own. And this weekend, we don't have a next steps, right? We don't have a moment for you to go over and talk to people. But there are definitely adults in this room right now that if you leave here and you have something you want to talk to someone about, just grab an adult that you want to talk to. We are here for you. We will always be here for you at Shepherd Youth. And so I want to encourage you to do that when you get a chance, all right? The last thing I want you to hold on to before I pray is this verse that I've held on to a lot in my life when I have these moments of stress, and it helps me, right? And it's in James chapter 1, verses 2 through 4 says, "Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance, and let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything." Shepherd Youth students, I want you to know, some of you guys I've probably never met yet. But I also want you to know that I love you dearly, because if I didn't, I wouldn't have been working on this staff for the past 8 years, almost 8 years. I love what I get to do and be with you guys. All of us do. Anyone you see in this room that's an adult, they are here for you and they love you. And we're here to remind you that when you get stressed out, you don't have to go through that stress alone. I've led D groups now for a long time. And the very first thing that I want my guys to understand and know about me is that I'm always going to be there for them. I may not be the quickest to respond, but I will always be there for them, because they don't need to be going through life alone. So I encourage you guys to find those people in your life, okay? Trust God, depend on God, and depend on others. We say it all the time at Shepherd Church, love God and love people, right? I want you to remember too, go to God and go to people that you trust. Let me pray. Dear Jesus, Lord, thank you so much for today, God. I thank you for the opportunity to worship, God, to have a good time, to connect. And God, today I pray for every single middle school and high school student in this room right now that is maybe feeling like they are stressed out beyond their control, that they are stressed out by things that are without their control, God. And I pray, Lord, that they will learn to trust you, God, and and that they will learn to trust others in their lives. God, we love you so much, and it's in your name that we pray. Amen.